Um, so I had a conversation with a friend who was telling me about a friend of his who was a couple that he knew, and the guy in the couple was actually having an affair, and my two friends were talking, and they were saying, should we let the wife know what the husband is doing? Should we say anything about it, or do we say anything about it, or how do we kind of, what's our responsibility in this relationship? What's the right thing to do? And they got into this conversation, and I was in the conversation, but it kind of went to where the two people I were talking with were saying, well, what's right for this person may not be right for, maybe that wouldn't be right for me, but maybe it's right for this person to do this. And so they had this, kind of conversation of, each person decides what's right for themselves, and maybe that's the right thing for him to do. So I got in, we kind of got into this long conversation, and I was asking, well, what if are you saying that's right for some people? And they said, yeah, it's for some people that's the right thing to do. For other people, and then we got into this discussion about is there an objective right and wrong? Is there something that's wrong across the board for everybody? Is there something that's right across the board for everybody? It's kind of an interesting conversation, but that's what we call subjective moral reasoning. What is subjective moral reasoning? Okay, so subjective moral reasoning or subjective morality. This is what when moral law is determined by society, where the individual members of society or society at large determines what's right and wrong, and there's no, so it's subjective, depending on the subjects, depending on who is how they feel about things, that determines right and wrong. Now, this is something that's been going on for thousands of years, to where society judges or decides what's right and wrong. That's really the way it's been going for thousands of years. But really, in this, with subjective morality, whatever each person thinks is okay, and don't mind Eunice making all the racket in the background. And so whatever each person thinks is okay, but that's up to each person to decide for themselves what is right and wrong. Because there is no such thing as right and wrong in this kind of, in this line of thinking. So, do you guys see anything wrong with this line of thinking, that each person decides for themselves? Since you can't respond except by typing, it makes it a little trickier, but so the difference between subjective morality or subjective moral reasoning and objective moral reasoning is, subjective means it's up to each person to decide for themselves. Now, objective would be meaning that it's that there's an absolute standard for right and wrong, and it's not up to each person. It's something beyond us deciding what's right and wrong. It's there's a higher standard. And maybe this might be a good illustration, would be flavors of ice cream. So maybe Eunice likes strawberry ice cream, or maybe I like strawberry ice cream, and to me, that's the very best. Maybe for Eunice, she likes jalapeno
Ew,
ice cream.
that's nasty.
And so for me, that would be the right thing, and for her, that would be the right thing. But and it's really regardless of what each person thinks. But so the objective morality means there's a higher standard that is not decided by me or you or anybody else. It's really a higher standard that's set by something outside of not just us as individuals or a government or a state or a group of nations, something like that. It's something even higher than that. And this kind of gets to the point to where you have to decide, where people have to decide, well, is there a God? Because if there is no God, then subjective morality is the only way you can go. And if there is a God, then there has to be objective morality. There's God can set this. When we talk about evil, it's always about a person. It's either a person raising the question, or it's about people. And so the objective morality goes beyond that. So hopefully that's not too confusing. It's I find it a little hard to explain, even though I think it's clear up here. But hopefully that makes sense. And this is why I really wanted to do this lesson in person, but so we could kind of talk through this. So the problem with subjective morality is there is a loss of a point of reference for moral absolutes. And some people say, well, I don't really want the moral absolutes. I don't really want a tyrannical, somebody telling me what I got to do, what I can't do, and what are my limitations. I don't really want limitations. I want to set those for myself. And I think, in some way we kind of all don't want to be told what to do. But when you take that away, then we lose a point of reference for moral absolutes. Think about this. You're at a stoplight and you're kind of daydreaming or not paying attention or whatever. And then you notice that the car next to you is moving, and then you're not sure if it's you're not sure if it's them moving or you moving. So the first thing you do is you hit the brakes, and you see that something is still moving. Then you take your eye and you look at maybe a building or a tree or something that's immovable, and then that gives you a frame of reference, because we have that unmovable point of reference. It's just had a light bulb moment. It's making sense to at least one person. Okay, so we look for that fixed reference point, and as we have moved into becoming a society, as we as society at large have kind of rejected rejected God and the Bible, and we've moved away from this objective morality into something that's every person decides for themselves what's right and wrong, and we will decide the morality as a society. We'll vote on it, and things like that. We have taken away that fixed, permanent, unmovable frame of reference. And some people are like, well, that's fine, because if society decides that this is right, then it's okay. If society decides this is wrong, then it's wrong. Well, in theory, that might sound good. That is, if everyone wants to help each other, and everyone wants to have each other's best interest at heart. But, think about this. What if not everybody has everyone else's best interest at heart? What if not everyone else is looking out for other people and how they're impacted? What if everybody's looking out for themselves? Then what? What if everybody is looking out for what feels good to me, and what is it that I want to do, because what I want to do is the right thing? Well, let's take that a step further. What if world leaders adopt this line of thinking that let's do what's good for me, being the leader in power. Let's work to those best interests. Just in the 20th century alone, there was more. There were more deaths caused by Mao, the Chinese leader, Stalin, and Hitler than in the previous 19 centuries combined, because they threw out the objective morality, the objective standard of right and wrong, and they went with their own. So to an extent, we all want the freedom to decide for ourselves what is right and wrong because it feels good, and we don't want limitations on ourselves. But it really becomes a dangerous position for us, and it's a slippery slope, because it just, there's really no ending to what we want for ourselves when we start going down that path. Imagine if we did throw out all morals and the source of the morality, the objective source, and we all did what we wanted to do. And, that would actually be kind of a scary place to be. And this is not just for the savage nations, for the barbarians, the headhunters. The most educated, the smartest and the brightest and the most educated nation in the world was Germany in the 1930s, and look what the brightest and the most intelligent did when they threw out objective morality. They weren't the barbarians, because some people think, well, yeah, I mean, if we were all barbarians and headhunters and things like that, then yeah, we would go down that path. But we're educated. We have we have good schools, and we have things like that. But when you throw out the objective standard and anything becomes right to do, then really anything becomes an option. So. But a lot of people believe in this subjective morality, and they think that's a good thing. Think about maybe a military execution, maybe a beheading in Iraq. We've seen some of those, and some people would say, well, that's a terrible thing. But then you ask some other people, and they would say, well, he deserved it, based on what some of the things he did. And so, but think about, is it morally abhorrent to torture a child for my own pleasure? Do we see any problem with that? And if there is a problem with that, where do we get that from? Where do we get that objective moral value from? So I think deep down inside all of us, and if we look at Romans chapter 1, it's been programmed, it's been wired into our conscious that there is an objective right and wrong. You think about even cannibals, headhunters, which if you want some good cannibal jokes, talk to Andrew. But or mediocre cannibal jokes. Talk to Andrew. No, they're pretty good.
Maybe.
That's subjective.
Yeah.
So, but the headhunters, they actually kind of dehumanize. They go through a process to dehumanize the subject before they eat them, because even them, they know that there is a right and a wrong, and they're doing the wrong thing. So I think deep down inside of us, we know that there is a right and wrong. You look at Romans chapter 1, even those nobody is without excuse, because God's put it in our heart. He's put it in nature. He's put it in all this, and sometimes we choose to ignore what God has put here. You know, God has put. Something that just came to my mind. I don't know if I can remember it. God has put enough in the world here for us to know that there's a God. Okay, so the first problem with the subjective morality or subjective moral reasoning is there's no reference point. Really, whatever each person decides is really becomes right. The second problem with it is there's no meaning in life and there's no justice in death. So to adopt subjective morality, we have to completely leave the Bible, because the Bible teaches the exact opposite, that there is an objective standard. If we are the result of random events with no purpose and predetermined action, no free will, which is what the people that believe subjective morality, they think that we are all just pre-programmed and we do what evolution programmed us to do. They think that we have no free will at all. So if we are the result of random events with no purpose and no free will, then our lives are pointless, and then we die. And then those who commit these atrocities and do these awful, awful things by almost anyone's standard, they never get any punishment. And that's something that just really, and I think this is another thing that God programmed into us, to feel like that we have to see justice done. We really want to see justice done. What happens when you watch a movie? Well, the good guy always wins. Justice is always done. And on rare occasion, we'll watch a movie that justice is not done. The bad guy gets away, and we said that it has a bad ending, and we end up hating the movie because we know deep down inside it's wrong and justice was not done. Well, so when you have subjective morality and there's nothing after, well, when we adopt this idea of subjective morality, subjective moral reasoning, then really there's nothing after death, because we have to throw out the Bible completely, and there's no justice done for the people who have done some of the most awful things in history, and there's been atrocities and genocides in nearly every people group. But they never get their reward. They never get justice for what they've done. And then that just kind of causes us to despair when it's like our lives become the bad movie, to where the justice is not done, and the Hitlers of the world and the Stalins and the people that have killed so many people, and done so many just awful things, they never get justice. So that's the second problem with subjective morality. First is loss of a point of reference in moral absolutes. Second is there's no meaning in life and there's no justice in death. Well, the third problem is, and the first two were the big ones. The third one is kind of a side note that is, we only have so much bandwidth to process the information that comes to us. We have a limited amount of willpower. We have a limited bandwidth to process all the information that comes to us. And we are hardwired to live consistently and try to keep the story of our lives consistent. So if you think about the amount of brain power needed to decide on the spot each time if something is right or wrong and still live consistently, then it's enough to drive you crazy. So that's, the first 2 points are the big ones, but just for my own sanity's sake, I need an objective point of reference. I need an objective moral standard. You know what? I wrote down some notes here on the side that I meant to put in the last point. When we talk about life, and this is kind of part of number 2, I guess. When we go by the subjective morality, then life only has value to the extent that government or the state or the authorities say that the life has value. And there's nothing beyond what the state or the government says that we have value. So then if the government decides that unborn life has no value, then that has no value. If they say that the old people have no value and we should dispose of them, then that becomes the standard. If they decide that, as governments have done in the past, that maybe the Jews have no value, or in the past they've said that African American slaves have no value, and you could go down Cambodian killing fields, the racial cleansings in the different parts of the world. When we go by this standard, then the state decides who has value and what value they have. But see, with objective morality, since we're taking it outside of the subjective, since we're taking it to a higher standard, a higher power, then with the objective morality, all life has intrinsic value, valued by God, not extrinsic. So the extrinsic value is the value that the state says that you have.
So in other words, it's like limited.
Yes.
It's almost like they put a cap on the value of your life. Is that what you're
Yes.
trying? Okay.
Yes. Thanks
Just
for
wanna clarify.
piping up there. Okay, so the extrinsic value is placed on you by other people. And if you think about, if we think about our contribution to society compared to, if we disagree with the leading authorities, then they may say, well, you have no value. And that's happened in plenty of times, plenty of places where they say, well, you disagree with the local authorities or the government, you have no value, and it's the end for you, or we're, imprisoning you. So that's the extrinsic value. The government or the state says you have value. But, we were created in God's image. And because we were created in God's image and after Him, then we have extrinsic value, or we have intrinsic value, value that's not given to us by the state, but value that is given to us by God. God says we have value. And so that's, I think that's a huge point, because no matter what other people think of me, I know that God still thinks I have a lot of value. Checking some of my side notes here to see if I missed anything else here. Okay, so first problem with subjective morality is loss of point of reference for moral absolutes. Second is there's no meaning in life, no justice in death. Third, we only have so much mental bandwidth to process information. Okay, so the solution. Okay, so if subjective morality doesn't work and it doesn't make sense and it's unlivable, what's the solution? Okay, so we need something that's reliable and consistent that we can use as a guide. So let's talk about the Bible as an objective point of reference. Okay, so the Bible has historical accuracy. We did a whole one or two lessons on the historical accuracy of the Bible. And if you want that, I have it recorded if you want to hear it. The Bible is historically accurate. Number two, it's coherent. If you look at the whole story of the Bible, it all makes sense together. And then number three, it answers the big questions of origin, morality, meaning, and destiny. And we talked about that at another time. But the Bible answers those four questions. And, really, if you look at science or other alternatives, maybe it answers one of these, but it doesn't answer all four. So the Bible answers all four of the big questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Number four, the Bible is timeless, non-preferential, it's fair, it's pure, and it applies equally to all. It's not something that's manipulated, by government. It's not something that's, manipulated by governments and altered to fit their narrative. But it's timeless, and we read things that were written back thousands of years ago that still directly apply and fit our lives today. It's pure. It's so it's pure. I don't know what I wanted to say about that, but and it applies equally to all. There's no one that's above the Bible, or no one that can say, well, that doesn't apply to me. It applies equally to all.
It's like no exceptions.
Yeah, no exceptions. And then fifth, it works when used properly. And I wanted to put that when used properly because, a lot of times we see people twisting, adjusting, interpreting in a special way to fit their narrative, to fit their agenda. And but really the Bible, when it's used properly, it really works. Now a lot of damage is done when people twist, turn it, and they abuse people with Scripture, because we see a lot of times people, they have their own agenda. A church or a pastor or a religion will have their own agenda of, this is what we believe. Now let me go find some Scripture to prove it. And they abuse people with it, and they twist it, and they turn it, and there's a lot of damage that's done that way. But when it's used properly, it works. What else do we have that gives us an objective standard that meets all of these things, and it can be a guide for our life, not just for our lives, but for future generations. And of course, the people that that like the subjective morality, so they can do whatever they want to do. This is why they dislike it, because it puts limitations and restrictions on them that prevent them from doing what they want to do, because they know it's actually wrong. So anyway, I would love to have had this conversation in our class, so to get some back and forth feedback and input from you guys. So anyway, if you guys have any comments, you're welcome to type them in. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys. That's all I've got.